That's what thousands of children living in poverty have to deal with every day. In Washington, D.C. on October 10, 2010, it was found and recorded that 400 million children live in extreme poverty. Although, during the last 2 decades, we have seen a significant change and the majority of people have been stabilized and re-entered society. Jim Young, president of the World Bank Group, once stated, "Children should not be condemned to a life without hope, without a good education, and without access to good quality healthcare." Let us remember that. One book, one pen, one child, and one teacher can change the world. Spoken by Malala Yousafzai. Where I was born and raised in the Hello South Africa, I had witnessed what children dealt with on a daily basis in order to get a basic education. At this time, I was 8 years old and wasn't aware of the situation that I was surrounded by and the extent of poverty surrounding my country. It wasn't uncommon for adolescents to be roaming around the neighborhoods, begging for food, money, or even trying to sell items like chargers, sunglasses, or something they could sell for value and make a profit. During desperate times, some of the adolescents were put in a situation whether to break the law or to starve. This was the harsh reality. Having witnessed this, I now realize how privileged I am to live in a safe country where I have the right to an education and I'll never go to bed hungry. Now, 8 years on, this has inspired me to create a desk and stool out of reusable items that can be found easily. So let me show you how you can turn this into this. Once you have gathered your reusable materials or the pallets you have found, start taking them apart using any tools you have available, such as a hammer, crowbar, and a large flathead screwdriver or any other tools that you may find necessary to dismantle the pallets. The most efficient way to use the crowbar, hammer, and screwdriver is to first hammer in the screwdriver to create the gap for the larger head of the crowbar to fit. Rock the crowbar back and forth till you remove the plank. Continue this till all the pallets have been completely dismantled to the individual pieces of wood. Before any cutting can be done, make sure all the nails are removed, also making sure there are no nails hidden within the wood. I then collected all the wood that was in good condition, and the pieces that weren't were put aside. I then marked a line roughly center on each piece, which then would be cut to gather more pieces and shrink the overall thickness of the tabletop. Next, I gathered the pieces that were going to be used as a chair top and marked a line exactly center. Following that, I then grabbed 4 thick but long pieces of wood that were going to be used as the legs for my table. I decided to make them all 70mm long, as it fits the common height of a table in a classroom. Once all the measurements were made, I then cut the pieces in half using the circular saw, which roughly left each piece 50mm in width and 840mm in length. Next, I used the jigsaw to finish off with the chair top and the table legs. Once I had all the pieces I needed, I then organized the pieces I was going to use for the tabletop in a way which the glue would bond most efficiently, meaning putting the both pieces together and facing them the same way. The tabletop was done in 2 sections to give it the best chances of having a stronger top that could bear more weight. Once I had laid all the glue down and compressed the pieces together, I then grabbed as many clamps as I could get my hands on and left it to dry. Leaving it to dry, I then started on the chair top, laying them down, following the second layer, crossing over to make it stronger, and gluing the 2 sections together. The following day, after leaving the glue to dry overnight, I removed the clamps and started on the second section using the same process. Once the tabletop had fully dried, I started to measure where I wanted to make my final cut. I decided to cut it flush 50mm in from the shortest piece of the table. Now that I have a complete tabletop, I grabbed the 4 legs and marked out the dimensions of each leg, also marking the legs 1 back, 3 front, etc., as none of the legs were exactly the same. Next, I removed the marked out area, allowing the legs to remain flush with the tabletop when screwed in. Once the marked areas were removed, I then grabbed the 4 legs accordingly to the side, laid out the glue, compressing it with a clamp, drilling the pilot holes, and then finally screwing in the 3-inch screws to secure the leg to the tabletop, repeating on all sides. Now that I have a complete table, to make the tabletop look larger, I grabbed another 4 pieces similar in width and bolted them to all 4 sides of the table. The 2 sides were 140 by 540 millimeters, and the front and back were 140 by 880 millimeters. Doing this also improves the strength of the legs. I then cut the leftover edges of the chair top to make it square. Next, using the drop-down saw, I cut the pieces to size that I was going to use as my chair base, making them 320mm for the sides and 280mm for the back and front. Once I had all the pieces I needed for the base, I pre-drilled and screwed the base together. Once I had the back and front legs, chair top, base and the cross support beams, I then started to create the housing joints for the back chair legs and the ribhead joints for the front, using a saw to cut the grooves and a chisel and hammer to remove the wood, making sure the chair height was 440mm. Next, I grabbed glue to cover the surface where I was placing the legs. I then clamped the legs down so I was able to pre-drill the pilot holes and screw on the legs. I used 3 3-inch screws in a triangle as I didn't have many screws left, still making sure the legs wouldn't wiggle themselves out of place over time. I then repeated this on the other side of the chair. After building the frame of the chair, I then cut a 20-degree angle for the backrest. Next, cutting a 15-degree angle on the chair legs on the inside. Once I cut the angles, I cleaned them up using a Surform rasp so that it wasn't as rough. I then grabbed the 2 crossbeams for the chair that are 85mm by 340mm. Screwing 2 screws on either side and repeating on the piece below. Once the frame of the chair was built, I cut out the sides of the chair top to allow it to fit between the chair rest. I then laid out the glue on the base, pressing down the chair top. To secure the top, I drilled 2 pilot holes and screwed it down. To finish it off, I lightly sanded both the table and the chair, taking away all the rough edges. So I hope I've inspired everyone out there, because as you can see, anyone who cares and is willing to make a difference can change the world one small project at a time. No matter how small, get out there and make that difference.